Welcome back to Meeting in Middle America, our podcast here on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee Lubar Entrepreneurship Center. On the show today is Kathleen Gallagher, a Pulitzer Prize-winning business reporter who's also the executive director of the Milwaukee Institute and host of the radio show, How Did You Do That, on public radio here. So we talk with her about startup founders, the unique characteristics they bring to the table, and the future of the ecosystem here in Milwaukee. Hope you enjoy the show. All right, welcome back to Meeting in Middle America. I'm joined here with Kathleen Gallagher. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. Kathleen is the executive director of the Milwaukee Institute, which looks at the regional entrepreneurship ecosystem and has a great initiative that we'll talk about, the Five Lakes Initiative, and also has a radio show at WUWM on the NPR affiliate here in Milwaukee called How Did You Do That, where you talk to startup founders. So we'll dig into that a little bit. But let's start with you and your personal story. We were just now talking a little bit ago about how you grew up in Green Bay, and so tell us more about that experience growing up and how that ultimately led you to being here in Milwaukee and focusing on entrepreneurship issues.
Well, that's
a big one.
I could give you a long answer, but I won't. So I grew up in Green Bay, and then I went to Marquette for college, and then to UW-Madison. I graduated from UW-Madison, and then moved to Chicago. And in Chicago, I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, and I had various other jobs, and I was there for probably 10 years, and then wanted to come back here. So I came back and started freelancing. I ended up freelancing for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, and through that freelance gig, I knew a lot about banking, so I got the job as the banking reporter at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Nice, nice. And can't move on without touching a little bit on Green Bay, which is, you were there, you've seen Bart Starr live in action, and your family has a lot of history with the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, my dad was the Grand Marshal for the parade to open Lambeau Field, the new Lambeau Field in 1957, and he emceed a lot of player banquets for Vince Lombardi during the 60s, but Green Bay was little, you know, everybody knew everybody,
yeah.
Right? So it's a much bigger enterprise now, right?
Yeah, and the Packers used to play here in Milwaukee, right, at County Stadium? Yeah. So, okay, so let's fast forward now into the entrepreneurship space. First of all, for everyone who's tuning in, what is the Milwaukee Institute and what type of role does it play in the community here?
So the Milwaukee Institute was founded by John Burns, who he ran the private equity group at M&I Bank, which was the biggest commercial bank, the biggest bank headquartered in Wisconsin. He spun it out into Mason Wells, which is one of the most successful private equity firms around, certainly in the country, I would say. And he started the Milwaukee Institute toward the end of his career at Mason Wells to, I like to think of it as to fix the problems that he saw while he was doing his private equity stuff in the Midwest. The kind of, the lack of cohesiveness in a technology agenda and in scaling up startups. And so that's some of the stuff we're trying to address.
Yeah, and what do you think is the biggest challenge that you've seen facing entrepreneurs who are trying to grow their businesses here in the Midwest? What's that roadblock to helping them actually scale?
I don't think we have the right infrastructure in place. You know, we now have a lot of pipeline of young startups, but we don't have the people, the entrepreneurs who've been successful, who've done it over and over again. We don't have them digging in and helping these startups scale. We've had some unicorns out of Chicago. Grubhub is one that comes to mind, but we don't scale startups the way they do on the coast.
Yeah, that's a big challenge for sure. And you now have the Five Lakes Initiative. Just tell everyone what that's all about.
So we do the initiative in partnership with Startup Wisconsin and Matt Cordio, and our goal is to bring together Midwest people in the Great Lakes region who can help move the needle. We're going to have, for example, some events coming up where we're trying to bring together some of the best academic and corporate researchers in the region and highlight them and get people on the coast to pay attention to them.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been a business reporter, and you've studied the trends, the economic trends of this region. And for people who don't live in the Midwest, one of the trends they always keep hearing about is the loss of manufacturing jobs and the economic instability for a lot of people in the Midwest. And there's one theory that's what's driving some of the political preferences of people in Middle America. So what have you seen just over the course of your career that has been the most transformative in terms of those business trends that people on the coasts hear about so much?
Can I back up 1 minute?
Yeah,
because you're so good at all these questions. I want to jump in somewhere in the middle there. I think one of the issues that happens here is that we do have a big manufacturing base, like you said, and manufacturing is kind of a thinner margin industry. So what happens is our manufacturing companies are set up so they can't put a lot of money into R&D. So where does the R&D happen? It happens on the coast. Where does the money for that R&D come from? A lot of it comes from us. It comes from our pension plans and our endowments and our foundations. So we export our investment dollars to the coast, and they create companies and scale them that disrupt the industries we have here, right?
Right, that's a great point. Yeah.
So one of the things we need to do is figure out how to scale those disruptive companies ourselves and not disrupt ourselves out of business, right? So I just think that relates to this whole political question. What happens is people work for these companies that get smaller and smaller and smaller, but their pension money is going to the coast to disrupt themselves.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. Yeah. And how well, when you look at the past, let's say 2 decades, how well has a so-called Rust Belt city like Milwaukee done with weathering the economic turbulence and kind of renewing itself for the new economy?
Well, the interesting thing about Milwaukee, I think, is that we have these pockets of success. We don't have organized ecosystem success. We have pockets of success. And one example of that, we were talking about on that radio show I do. It's a segment. Let's be fair. It's a segment on Lake Effect on WWM, not a show. Yeah. But one of the people we like to interview founders with measurable success, and one of the people we interviewed is
Kevin Conroy.
No. I'll come to him.
Okay.
Pete Ulrich,
Pete, yeah.
who started Titan Spine. Yeah. And Titan Spine's a great example of this. He was a spine surgeon in Neenah, and he realized that titanium would be a better material to use for these spine fusion devices that are made. And no one else, he was a pioneer in this, no one else agreed with him. And get this, he went to Plymouth High School. He got a classmate of his from Plymouth High School to be the president of the company. And he continued as a spine surgeon for a long time, developing this technology. And the two of them together built this company that in the last 12 months was sold to Medtronic for an undisclosed amount, but it was like a lot. And it's now going to be a platform company for Medtronics to build kind of this titanium device. But it happened almost despite the ecosystem, right? It happened because these guys figured all this stuff out, and they found researchers in different areas that they could work with. And it didn't happen because we had a cohesive, go here, here, here in our ecosystem. Wow. So there's a lot of that around here.
Absolutely. So you referenced your radio segment. How did you do that? It's such a fun concept, and I've tuned in a couple times. So tell us, what is the format, and how did you come up with the idea for that?
Well, I didn't come up with the idea. Tim Keene, who runs the Golden Angels investing group, came up with it, and he asked me to join him on it. Tim actually, it's kind of sad, we just recorded our last episode together. He's so busy with all kinds of stuff, including building a photography business. He's like 70-something.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a very active guy, right? I know. And he's a really good photographer. So I'm going to continue doing this segment without him. But Tim came up with it, and his idea was there are all these successful founders running around, and no one has kind of pulled them all together and created, what we're creating is a digital archive of all these successful founders. And there are a lot of them, a lot more than you think.
I bet. And so going into detail of what sort of steps these founders have taken, and I'm, by the way, a big believer that there are a lot of intangibles to being a successful entrepreneur. It's not just the things you might learn in a textbook, for example.
It's that little clause they stick in your documents that like you didn't notice the first time.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, exactly. So what is it about some of the entrepreneurs you've met that's prompted them to be so successful? Like we were just talking earlier about Kevin Conroy, who's a very successful entrepreneur here in Wisconsin. And what are some of the more interesting things you've uncovered from this set of interviews?
Well, let me say about Kevin, he runs Exact Sciences.
Yeah.
Ticker is EXAS, and that's a great story. He was with another successful company. He was the lawyer and then the head guy, and it went public. So he went looking for another company. He found Exact in Boston. They had botched their clinical trials, and he said, "I'll run it if you move it to Madison." He's in Madison. So they allowed him to move it, and he's grown it. He just did a big acquisition of a California company. He's building essentially a DNA-based diagnostic test platform company.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. What is it about Kevin and about Pete and all these other people? I think they dream big. I mean, that sounds so cliche, but they don't think, what's the app I can make? They think, what's the platform I can build? And they, if they haven't done it before, they find the people who can give them advice about that, about, when you're building that platform, how do you have to set it up to begin with to be successful in the long term? Are your profit margins right? Do you have the right marketing in place? All the stuff that goes into that, they figure it out at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then, obviously pivot as they go, but they find experienced people to help them, or they find experts to. Kevin Conroy told me a story once about trying to get regulatory approval for something, and the first time they failed, and he went out and he found the person in the country who's best at helping companies do that. And that's what, Andy Ziegler's another person who comes to mind. He started Artisan Partners, a very successful money management firm. Same thing, they go find the best people to help them do it.
Yeah. Yeah, building a great team is one of the lessons I've learned as an entrepreneur.
And a great board or advisory board, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Having great mentors walk you through the ups and downs.
And dreaming big. I mean, you dream big.
I try to, yes, yeah. So now, as you look ahead and you look to the future over the next, say, 20 years for this regional economy, a lot of people, and we were talking earlier about how now, because Wisconsin's in the news, a lot of analysts and journalists on a national level are coming here to try and understand what are the forces that are creating some of the political preferences that will make Wisconsin such an important state in the 2020 election. And part of the mission with this podcast is to go a little bit deeper than that and understand what's behind those trends. So as you look out into the future, what do you think people nationally need to understand about where a community like Milwaukee or even a state like Wisconsin is going? Any big breakthroughs in terms of industries, like we were talking earlier about biomedical, or maybe something else, water research, that is going to matter on a national scale to people? Well,
you got to pick your lanes, and I mean, what are we good at, and what can we build on? From a research perspective, in the state, UW-Madison is by far the big research university, and in the Milwaukee region, it's Medical College of Wisconsin. That's like, look at the numbers. That's what we got.
That's right.
In Milwaukee, we've also got a lot of big companies that have potential to spin out technologies. So there's that. But you also have to look at what is Milwaukee good at, right? Certainly there's room for advanced manufacturing. Obviously, health. We're really good at metal bending, right?
Yeah,
I think we've had the disease of trying to pretend we're good at everything for a long time, and you gotta pin it down and then go for it, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, for viewers who might want to learn more about your radio segment, how can they tune into it?
Well, you can the easiest way, it's in the iTunes store and it's on the WWM and NPR platform. You can just Google, how did you do that, WWM.
Okay,
Find it.
great.
So,
excellent.
thanks
Well,
for asking
thanks so
that
much.
question.
Absolutely.
Thanks
Always
for
got to
asking.
promote good things here. So thanks again, Kathleen. Really appreciate it.
Likewise.
Thanks, everyone.